Imagine this. What if you could fire your elected representative before their 5-year term is up? I know, right? That's the powerful and, let's be honest, deeply controversial idea behind the right to recall in India. So, how would it even work? And could it ever actually become a reality? Well, let's dive in and find out.
Just let that sink in for a second. A panic button. See, it's not a button for everyday disagreements or, some small frustration. It's a tool designed for real emergencies, for when things are going seriously, fundamentally wrong, and you just can't wait for the next election to fix it. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll unpack what this panic button really is. Then we'll get into the big arguments for it, and of course, the shadowy risks that come with it. After that, we'll look at the massive constitutional surgery it would take to make it happen, and we'll wrap up with a much-needed political reality check. All right, first things first, let's get on the same page. What are we actually talking about when we use this phrase, right to recall? Okay, so in simple terms, it's a legal process that gives voters the power to kickstart a special election. The whole point? To decide if their MP or MLA should be removed from office right then and there. It basically turns that 5-year fixed contract into more of a live subscription model. And you can cancel if the service is bad. And you know what? This isn't some brand new out there idea. Nope. As you can see, different versions of it are already being used all around the world. From local governments in the US to national lawmakers in Taiwan, it's a tool that democracies are already experimenting with. Of course, the rules and how often it gets used, well, that changes a lot from place to place. So now that we know what it is, let's get into the why. Why do so many people get excited about this idea? Well, for its supporters, this isn't just some administrative tool. They see it as a powerful sword of justice. The whole thing really boils down to one word: accountability. Continuous accountability. Right now, we're kind of like election day warriors. We show up, we vote, and then, we wait 5 years. This flips that script completely. We become term time supervisors. Imagine if your MP knew that vanishing after an election or getting caught in a scandal could have immediate consequences. It forces them to listen, to focus on local issues, and it might even push political parties to pick better candidates to begin with. But, and this is a big but, this is where the debate really heats up. Supporters will tell you it makes democracy more responsive, more in tune with the people. But opponents, they're worried it would just make our entire political system dangerously restless and unstable. And right there, that's the core of the whole argument. And that brings us to the other side of this. Because, like they say, every sword has two edges. And a tool this powerful, well, it could absolutely be used to create some serious chaos. I mean, the risks are very real. What if politicians get so focused on just surviving that they never make tough long-term policy decisions? What if rival parties just use this to constantly disrupt the government, not for real accountability, but just for political points? And then there's the cost of all these extra elections, not to mention the very real danger that a truly brave reformist leader could get punished for doing something that's right, but not necessarily popular at the moment. Okay, so we've seen the pros and we've seen the cons, but let's get practical for a minute. How on earth would you actually make something like this happen in India? Because let me tell you, this isn't a simple software update. We're talking about major constitutional surgery. And right out of the gate, you hit a massive wall, a 2/3 majority, not just in one house, but in both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Getting that kind of support for, pretty much anything is incredibly rare. That is an extremely high bar to clear. And believe it or not, passing that amendment is just step one. After that, you'd need at least half of the states to approve it. Then, you'd have to build this whole legal machine from the ground up, defining the rules, figuring out how many signatures you need, the whole shebang. You'd have a petition phase, and if that works, the Election Commission would have to hold a special vote. And of course, you'd have to build in some serious safeguards, like no recalls in the first or last year of a term, just to prevent it from being misused constantly. So this brings us to the final and maybe the most important part of the puzzle, the reality check. It might sound interesting on paper, but is it even politically possible? And hey, don't think for a second this is just some old academic debate. It's happening right now. A proposal was recently introduced in the Rajya Sabha that has thrown this whole topic right back into the national spotlight, and you can bet lawmakers are talking about it again. This quote it hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? For a politician, a guaranteed 5-year term is their oxygen. It's their safety net.
So why on earth would they ever vote to give us, the passengers, an eject button? It goes against every single instinct for political survival.
And when you really break down the political math, it becomes pretty clear. The ruling party? No way. They don't want the risk. The opposition? Well, they're hoping to be the ruling party tomorrow, so they don't want it either. And regional leaders? They're just worried it could create chaos in their states. At the end of the day, it's a reform that threatens pretty much everyone currently in power.
So, where does all this leave us? It really boils down to a fundamental conflict, right? The desire of a democracy for more accountability versus the instinct of political power to protect itself. The people might want a panic button, but the pilots in the cockpit are probably never going to install it themselves. The real question for the future is, which one of those forces will ultimately be stronger?